I want to give a massive shout out to Spartan123563 for requesting tonight's movie, The Hunger.
That's the only time I feel really alive.
That's what David wanted.
Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster the breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers, and Happy New Year! The sun has gone down, so you know what that means. It's time to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. Find me on Instagram at The Beautiful Dead Podcast, or just subscribe so you can see all my posts here on YouTube. We can have some fun conversation. It is 2026. Happy New Year's to everybody. I hope you had amazing holidays. Please let me know what are your big, huge goals for 2026. Mine is to move to New Orleans. I want to end 2026 in an apartment in New Orleans. Juliet, what is your goal for 2026? I don't know. Yeah, it's probably more bones. That's all she cares about. So I am going to be working on Soren for the next few months. So if you follow me on Instagram or here on YouTube, then you'll know kind of what's happening with this 6th book. I will tell you, I'm very stressed out. I'm feeling a lot of pressure. It is a massive undertaking, but I'm very, very excited to do it. It's an undertaking because people really, really want this story. So I'm feeling the pressure. All right, we're doing viewers' requests in January. I want to start the year off right, which is doing what you want. So this one was requested. I have done it before, but I did it when we were audio only. So it's time to bring it back to YouTube. I'm going to say what I always say. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to share, but I'm going to try and share some scenes from the movie. I will do the best I can. This is a movie I've seen many, many times, but every time I sit down and watch it, it does kind of change for me. So I was excited to do it again. Spoiler alert, I talk about everything from beginning to end. If you're new to the podcast, subscribe. Do a girl a favor and subscribe. But also, I talk about everything. So I do kind of like try and break down the vampire rules of this world. But we do talk about the movie from the beginning to the end. And I just want to jump in because I love this movie. Okay, The Hunger. This is one of, if not the greatest openings to a vampire movie ever. I know Blade is up there. Blade is up there with the blood shower, but I think this is the best opening to a vampire scene or a vampire movie ever. Please let me know if you disagree. But I think this is it. We open in a sexy, dimly lit nightclub with the band singing Bela Lugosi's Dead. This is Bauhaus, for anyone who doesn't know. I wanted a Bauhaus t-shirt, but instead I wore Deftones. I feel like, you get what I'm trying to do here. But if anyone, can you even get a Bauhaus t-shirt? I should look. But I wore Deftones, which I'm okay with. Bela Lugosi's Dead. This is the thing I'm not sure they're going to let me play, but I'm going to try. A couple, John and Miriam, John played by the amazing David Bowie, watch another couple on the dance floor below and take them back to what I thought was a hotel room, but I think it might be John and Miriam's place, maybe. I'm a little confused. Anywho, John tells the girl they need to get ice, and he follows her to a different room while Miriam straddles the man. So it seems like it's just swingers. They're just swapping for the night, and it's about to get sexy because both couples are making out. And David Bowie looks like he'd be really nice to kiss. I bet he was a good kisser. When Miriam and John reveal their Ankh necklaces, you know I love an Ankh. For those of you who don't know, I have an Ankh tattoo. Their Ankh necklaces are actually small knives, and they slice their prey open and drink. Afterwards, they wash themselves and the necklaces. Then we cut to this research facility, and a doctor named Sarah is working with monkeys, and one of them seems very upset. Now we cut to John, who is burning the remains of the prior night's victims. And we will learn later in the movie that they have essentially a crematorium in the basement of their house. So smart. Didn't, in the interview with the vampire show, they had a crematorium in the backyard. So smart. Although in the French Quarter, it's going to be a little harder to hide that, but whatever. I think this is New York, Chicago. I don't know. Cut to John and Miriam in the shower kissing, and John says,
Forever.
Forever. Sexy, sexy. Then we cut to them in a bed in a beautiful apartment in the sun. We have the gauzy sheets around the bed. You guys know I love that. And so we know right out of the gate that they don't have fangs. They have to slice their prey. And we also know that they can be in the sunlight. So we also know they can just sleep in beds. Miriam is asleep, but John is restless. John's having a hard time sleeping. Back at the research facility, Sarah is watching one of her primates who's clearly being manic and trying to figure out what went wrong. So we learn that the subject hasn't slept in 50 hours. He attacked the female primate. He's not doing well. And so we get back and forth between them talking about what's happening with this primate and then watching John. So we know John's not sleeping.
Night before last, he didn't sleep a wink. He hasn't slept now for 50-some hours.
56.
John is pacing, he's smoking. So we'll learn in this movie that the vampires can smoke and they can also drink liquor. They can drink alcohol. And he's seeing flashes of a memory. And it's him in a barn, and Miriam is coming to him and saying forever and ever. Now, judging on their clothes, I would put this at least the early 1800s, probably the 1700s is what I'm guessing. We see Sarah on a TV program being interviewed about her work, and she is studying aging.
They all suffer from a disease called progeria. We don't exactly know what it is, but what it amounts to is a premature degeneration comparable to that of aging.
And she is trying to reverse aging in people who suffer from progeria. So John and Miriam are watching this interview when the doorbell rings, and it's a young girl, and this young girl is named Alice. And Miriam seems like really into this interview as John goes and lets Alice in. The young girl Alice is there for her violin lessons, and she plays with the couple. So John is on the cello, Miriam's on the piano. They play this beautiful piece, but then John just stops and leaves the room. And Miriam explains to Alice that he is not sleeping.
Oh, darling.
What's wrong with him?
He'll be all right. He's having trouble sleeping.
John's in the next room, and now we're starting to see he has wrinkles on his face. That's new. Miriam goes to a book signing where Sarah is, and Miriam stares at Sarah, and it sort of draws her attention. So suddenly Sarah is paying attention to Miriam, almost like she was drawn in. And she pays attention to Miriam, and Miriam tells Sarah, "I'd like to talk to you." Now we flip to John watching cartoons at home, he then lays down. Miriam goes to the hospital, and she asks for Dr. Humphreys, and this is one of Sarah's co-workers. So she's asking him about blood types and aging, and he explains that different blood types sleep differently. So your blood type can affect your sleep, and we all know that sleep affects aging. So that's kind of what they're looking at. Later, John is questioning Miriam, and he says, how long will it take? And then he says, how long did it take the others? And she's like, I don't remember.
I know it's a long time, but it's not the kind of thing that you forget. Lalia, how long did she take?
A week.
And he says, I know it's been a long time, but this is not the kind of thing that you forget. So she says, for Lolia, it took a week. She fed, but she could not sleep. And he says, the one before that, and she says, the same. She hoped that it wouldn't happen to him, that some kind of miracle would happen. And he says, so who is after me? Who will keep you company? But she doesn't want to have this conversation, so she just walks away.
Miriam! What am I going to do?
Then we get flashbacks of what looks like ancient Egypt. And then glass shatters, and we see Sarah's book falls to the ground, and it's called Sleep and Longevity. John arrives at the hospital where Sarah works, and he heads up to the sleep center where Sarah is. And he approaches her and asks if she believes what she said in her books, that aging is a disease that can be cured. He says, yesterday I was 30 years old, and today he has liver spots. And she's like, okay, wait here for 15 minutes and we'll do some tests. And then she leads him to a waiting room and assures him, I will be back in 15 minutes. I have a meeting. And he sits down to wait, and she goes and calls security, and she says, another crazy has wandered in here. He's sitting in patient waiting. And then she's like, nah, just leave him alone. If we let him wait, he'll probably leave. Meanwhile, we see that he's aging in real time. He's aging very quickly. In the research room, we see Sarah and her team watching the baboon, who's on 70 hours without sleep and is aging at a rapid rate. And the movie cuts back and forth between the baboon and John, who are both... What is she doing? She's trying to get my attention. We see the movie is cutting back and forth between the baboon and John, who are both aging very rapidly. John's hair is now falling out, back and forth. Baboon and John, aging. The baboon actually dies and then decays right in front of them. And at this point in time, John looks like he's 80, I would say, and he gets up to leave. Sarah's walking and she's talking to her coworker, who's also her boyfriend, Tom, and they were like, this tape is so valuable. We've discovered the secret of life and death, but they need more funding, and they're hoping that this tape is going to get them the funding they need, and they kiss. John looks in a mirror in a public bathroom, and he sees how old he is, and then he looks at the man next to him, and he's pulling out his necklace, and you think he might attack this man to feed on him, but then someone flushes a toilet and comes out of a stall, so he flees to an elevator. And you can, it does that thing that I love in horror movies and vampire movies specifically, where they're like hyperventilating and they can hear the heartbeats all around them and see the pulses in the throat and stuff. And like, he needs to feed. When he steps out of the elevator, he sees Sarah, who now sees that John has aged 40 years in 2 hours.
Believe me, you left me sitting there for over 2 hours.
Mr. Blaylock?
You had your meeting to go to. 15 minutes, you said you lied.
He says, you lied. And she's like, Mr. Blaylock, don't leave. And she's trying to get him to come back, but he's done. He's out. He's already lost not only 2 hours, but like pretty much the rest of his life sitting there waiting for her. This was his last shot. So he heads out to the city. Then we cut to a man who's roller skating around a boombox, which, those were the days. I need to go roller skating again. John attacks him and cuts him, but John at this point in time is just too old and too weak. It's not a good cut. The guy survives, so John just runs away. At his place, Alice rings the doorbell. And John uses the speaker and says, no one is here but me. And she's like, okay, well, can I leave a note for Miriam and John? And so she comes in because she wants to leave a note saying like, hey, I can't make it to practice tomorrow, but maybe another day. John unlocks the door and lets her in. And she comes in and she sees this old man. And she's like, are you John's father? Because you have the same eyes. Which for people who don't know, David Bowie had hematochromia. So he had one dark eye and one light eye. So when she says you have the same eyes, it would be weird for those two people to not be related because hematochromia is not common.
Are you sure you're not John's father?
Quite sure.
So she's like, are you sure you're not John's father? And he says, I'm just a friend. So she writes a note to Miriam and John asks her to play for him, which she does. And then John paces around. He reaches for the Ankh necklace and says, forgive me. And then he wraps his hand around the girl, her mouth, and slices her. Later, we see Miriam come home and she calls for him, but he doesn't answer. John is sitting in the corner of a music room. He's cleaned up all the evidence and he's like at least 100 years old at this point. He says, you said forever, never grow old. Do you remember? And she tells him to stop. He asks for a kiss. It flashes back and forth between them kissing now and their kiss when she turned him. Present day Miriam cries and he says, release me. She says, I can't. And then she sees a Polaroid on the floor. Oh, and I forgot to say that Alice carries around a Polaroid camera and is like taking pictures of people all the time. So she sees a Polaroid on the floor and she knows that Alice has been there. So she goes down to the crematorium and it's going. So she knows he killed Alice and burned Alice in there. He comes to the top of the stairs and he says, please kill me. And she says, I can't. There's no release. There's no rest. There's no letting go. He falls down the stairs. She rocks him and then she carries him to the elevator. She has an elevator in her house. And so we know that she's very strong because he's a grown man. And she does not seem to be struggling at all. She carries him to the elevator. They go up to the top floor and then she carries him up these small stairs up into like the attic space. And she goes up there and she is like laying him down. And while all this is happening, we get an explanation. So this is what we get. Their kind doesn't die. She places him into a wooden box where he will just lay there, feeling and hearing and seeing, but too old and too withered to move. And then we also see that she has more than one box up there. This is bleak. So she puts him in a box, she shuts it up, and then she pushes him like in next to the slot, next to a whole bunch of other boxes. And she touches one of the other boxes and she says, Lolia, this is John. Please comfort him. All of you. All my loves. And it pans back and I thought there was like 6 boxes there. Then the doorbell rings the next morning. Sarah is there and she tells Miriam that John visited the hospital and Sarah would like to apologize because she didn't believe him at first. Miriam says that John went to Switzerland.
And if you need anything, please call me, and I'd appreciate it if you could keep me close to him.
So Sarah gives Miriam her number and leaves as a man approaches and introduces himself as a lieutenant who is looking for Alice, who went missing. While she's talking to the cop, we see Sarah is walking and almost steps out in front of a Mack truck, but stops just in time. Meanwhile, Miriam takes her number out of her pocket and lays it against her heart. So the implication at this point in time is that Miriam is already connected to Sarah. Like she kind of knows what's happening. And she was involved in like making sure that Mack truck didn't happen. That was the implication I got from all of this. Let me know if you agree. So now Sarah is showering, and when she gets out of the shower and looks in the mirror, for a second she sees Miriam in the reflection, and then we see Sarah sleeping, and I think the implication is that she is dreaming of Miriam, who's dressed in black and playing the piano. So I think they are connected in this moment. So Miriam is grieving John, she's playing the piano, she has this black veil on, and Miriam has a tear roll down her cheek, and Sarah has a tear roll down her cheek. So they are connected now somehow. So we know that Miriam, at the very least, has this power to sort of like get into you and then connect to you. The next day, Sarah's at work when she picks up the phone and says hello, but her coworker's like, it didn't ring. Cut to Sarah, who shows up at Miriam's, and she says,
I don't know why I'm here.
I don't know why I'm here. But we know why, because Miriam has drawn her there. Miriam invites her in, she pours her a drink, and Sarah admires the house. Then Miriam plays the piano for her while they talk. Sarah says, I like your pendant, and Miriam says, it's the symbol of everlasting life.
I like your pendant.
It's Egyptian. You know, it was the symbol of everlasting life.
Miriam tells the story of Lakme, which is an opera, if you guys don't know it. And Sarah says, are you making a pass at me? And then she spills wine on her white shirt. And then she takes water to it. So now it's like see-through. We can see her boob. And then she just takes the shirt off. And Miriam goes to her with a fresh shirt. But instead, they kiss. And then they do what sexy adults do when they are alone, and opera plays, and there's gauzy white silk. And I told you guys when I did Dracula Rising, I love that. I love the gauze and the music and the romantic scene and all that stuff. I love it. But then we see what looks like Miriam feeding from Sarah's arm, and Sarah seems to be in like some kind of trance. So the vampire can clearly like put you into almost like an ecstasy so that you're not fully aware of what's happening. And then she feeds from Miriam. So we know it's a classic embrace. Now we cut to rare steak being cut, and Sarah's like, I'm not that hungry. And she can't eat. And now she has this Ankh necklace, and her boyfriend's like, what's that? And she's like, oh, Miriam gave it to me. And he's like, why is a stranger giving you a necklace? And what did you guys do for 3.5 hours at her house? And she's having flashbacks to her and Miriam, and they're like swimming in a pool. So I guess they went swimming at one point. That night, Sarah is vomiting, she's sweating, so clearly she's starting to undergo the turn. Later, her team is looking at her blood samples to see why she's so sick.
It isn't human blood.
It's not human.
And they explain that it's like 2 different blood strains are fighting for dominance, and one of them is not human. It's similar, but it's better, and it's stronger, and it's immune to disease. They ask her about the bruise with the puncture sites on her antecubital, and she's like, I don't know what it is. Then she goes to Miriam's, and she's like, what did you do to me? And Miriam said, trust me, give me time. I've given you everlasting life. My blood is in your veins. Sarah grabs Miriam, but Miriam lifts her up and throws her across the room. So we know Miriam's very strong. She says, I drank your blood and you drank mine, and now we belong to each other. Sarah storms out, but Miriam says, you'll be back. When the hunger is too strong and you have to feed and you need me to show you how to do it, you'll be back. Sarah runs into the city. She finds a payphone to call her boyfriend at the hospital, but he's not there. And then we get a man asking, like, hey, lady, can I use the phone? And it's Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is back on the podcast, everybody. Willem Dafoe loves a vampire movie. I want to have lunch with him so bad one day because he's done so many vampire films. I feel like he and I would have a great conversation about vampires. But Willem Dafoe back on the podcast. I'm pretty sure this is his first movie. If it's definitely his first vampire movie, but it might even be his first movie. I'll fact check and I'll put it on the screen. Willem, welcome back. Love you. I love you, Willem. After wandering around for a while, she does return to Miriam, who offers to bring Sarah someone to feed on.
I'm going to bring someone to you.
Meanwhile, her boyfriend is worried because she's been missing all day. Miriam brings a man back to her house. Sarah's in bed. She looks very bad. Miriam kisses her as the man uses the elevator to check out each floor. And Miriam's like kind of like stalking him. And then he ends up back down on the first floor. Sarah is in the fetal position. She is covered in sweat. The man steps out of the elevator. Miriam grabs him and cuts him. And then we see Sarah and she hears Miriam calling her name. So she gets out of bed to check. And she looks over the banister and she sees Miriam down on the first floor, cradling this bleeding man, blood around her mouth. So she's been feeding and she's calling her to come down. Her boyfriend Tom shows up at the house looking for Sarah, and Miriam lets him in and she's all cleaned up. So we don't know how much time has gone by, but she's all cleaned up. She says Sarah's upstairs in the bedroom and she is not well. Sarah's on the floor. She's curled up. She's shaking. She's diaphoretic, not looking great. So we know she hasn't fed yet. He lifts her into the bed and grabs a robe for her and she's wrapping it around. He's wrapping it around her. She kisses him and looks over to Miriam, who's watching, who's kind of like, this is your chance. Let's do this. And then she shoves him away and tells him to go, but he like holds onto her and he's wrestling her and he's like, no, I'm taking you. You're okay. You're okay. She's like, get the fuck out. Meanwhile, Miriam is having a memory of herself in ancient Egypt. I'm going to put a pin in that. Cut to Miriam playing the piano. Sarah comes down. She has blood on her mouth. She's covered in blood. And Miriam says,
You will sleep 6 hours in every 24. You will fit 1 day in 7. And from this moment, you will never grow old. Not a minute.
Vampire pause. Okay. So I love when they lay out the rules like this for me. So you feed 1 day of every 7 and you sleep 6 hours of every 24. But then Miriam says, and you'll never grow old. Fucking liar. You liar. Ooh, this was the moment where I was like, fuck Miriam. All right, bear with me. We're almost done. She says, we belong to each other and you will learn to love me as I love you. And then she says, forever. Fucking lies. Sarah kisses her, but while they're kissing, Sarah pulls the dagger out of the ankh and stabs herself in the throat and then falls to the ground. Miriam says, stay with me. Sarah says, I can't. So Miriam wails and she carries Sarah up to the attic to be placed in another box, but then the ground starts to shake. And John is standing there. And then more of her mummified lovers are all seen in the room. And she says, I love you all. But one by one, they reach for her. She drops to the ground as they surround her. And there are so many more than I realized. I thought 6, but there's way more than that. She runs into the hallway, but they catch up. And she falls over the railing and down the many, many, many floors that she has. And ends on this bottom floor. And as they watch on the ground, she starts to convulse, and then she starts to grow old and mummify too, as each of her lovers drops down and finally gets to die. So they all turn to ash. And this bit, by the way, felt a little bit like a HBO Tales from the Crypt episode. It feels like the way one of those would have ended. But all of these lovers finally, thank goodness, get to die. Cut to later, a later day, much later. The lieutenant shows up looking for Mrs. Blaylock, but he's met by a real estate agent who explains the whole estate is being sold. The owners are deceased, and the profits are going to a local blood research center. Then we cut to a beautiful apartment. A young girl comes in with a violin. She kisses a man on a couch, and then she walks over to Sarah who lived, she kisses Sarah. So Sarah survived, and she is the new Miriam. And then we see a coffin covered in a tarp in a storage room, and we hear Miriam calling out for Sarah. Credits. All right. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. You guys will not be surprised. Unless you're new to this podcast, you're not going to be surprised. I hate vampires that don't have fangs and can't be in the sunlight. However, I am about to be a hypocrite because I am going to allow it in The Hunger, because this is some kind of special vampire. So I am going to let this one slide because this is something we've never seen before, right? I do love it when vampires are sexually fluid, because it does not make sense to me that you would be alive for centuries and still stick to just one sex. That makes zero sense to me at all. So I love when vampires are sexually fluid. There was nothing in this movie I hated. I don't know if you guys are surprised by that, but this is one of those movies I cannot hate on. I just can't. I can't. This one is a classic, okay? And David Bowie. I love David Bowie. I mean, I would watch him. If he recorded a movie that was 3 hours of him sitting in an empty room staring at a corner, I would watch it. I would watch it. I would buy it. I would get the soundtrack. I would get the t-shirt. I loved David Bowie. All right. The ratings. How sexy or alluring are the vampires of The Hunger? These vampires are very sexual. Miriam clearly has some kind of allure because she draws people to her pretty quickly, and people become very obsessed with her right out of the gate. So I feel like she turns it up for certain people, but clearly people are pulled to her. Now, I'm gonna pull 2 points away. You know why? Because if you become Miriam's partner, you end rotting alive in a box for eternity. Kind of a downside, right? Like, I don't care how sexy you are, that's a downside. So it's still solid, very sexy. 8 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. So if you guys ever wondered why I used onks for the rating system for sexiness and allure, it was because of Embrace of the Vampire with Alyssa Milano, and The Hunger. These are the 2 movies that made me use onks as my sexiness score. How scary or evil are the vampires of The Hunger? They are not bound by the sun. They have a crematorium in their basement to get rid of you pretty quickly. They prey on humans in dance clubs. They kill them without remorse. If you're turned by them, it does end kind of horribly. And Miriam lies to her lovers. She tells them forever. She tells them you won't age. That is a fucking lie. So I felt bad for her in the beginning because I'm like, oh my God, it's like she's cursed. You know, she falls in love and then eventually these people like rot in boxes. But then when I saw her turn, first off, she forced the turn on Sarah. She did not let Sarah know what was happening. She forced the turn. And then she told Sarah, oh, don't worry, you're going to learn to love me. And then she's like, and you'll live forever and ever and you'll never age. Even though she just watched the love of her life go through this. She just watched John die, and she watched a dozen before him die, and she's still telling that lie, and she's still turning people because she doesn't want to be alone. That is pretty freaking evil. So the thing I had to ask myself was, are they more evil or sexy? I think it's a tie. Honestly, I think it's a tie. So I'm going to say 8 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil, as well as sexiness and allure. Water break. Getting myself all wound up here. I needed water. All right, my thoughts. Some vampire movies are too artsy for their own good, okay? They get so artsy that they leave a majority of their audience in the dust. I have a few movies that I felt that about. I'm not gonna get started now, but this movie is not one of them. I loved it. I loved the flashes of Miriam's history. I loved the back and forth between the primates and John. I loved the way that they tied those two things together. I would love to know Miriam's origin, but let me tell you my theory, and you can tell me if you agree with me. So we see Miriam in ancient Egypt, and she is feeding on somebody. I think Miriam is a goddess. So I think she's a vampiric goddess, and that's why she can turn people, but they inevitably will grow old and live forever in a box. So it's like she's a goddess, but she's almost like a cursed goddess. So all of these millennia, we're talking about pre-Christian, she has been one of the Egyptian goddesses, and she's existed all this time, and she's had her followers, because we know a lot of gods and goddesses get their power from followers. So she's had her followers, but inevitably, because of the curse, the people that she loves and turns after a couple hundred years end up in a box, mummified, but still alive, and then she moves on to the next person. So she is special and unique. She is not like those she turns. And I think what happened was, because Sarah was the first person who said, I would rather die than be your follower, she broke the curse. So that is why Miriam was able to die. And that's why all of her followers, the curse was broken for them as well. So now Sarah is the new goddess. That is my theory. Let me know what you think. This is one of those films that every time I watch it, I catch something new. And I have to say, the older I get, the more this hits home. It's a little bit hard to watch because David Bowie's no longer with us, so that makes it a little hard to watch. But this time around, it was harder to watch than the previous time, because the fear of aging and watching yourself age and not being able to turn back the clock, wanting the cure, wanting the secret. I mean, it is very scary stuff as you get older. And so I really connected to the idea of that, the fear of aging. I have probably watched this movie 20 times. The first time I watched it, I think I was in middle school or high school. So clearly I was not thinking about aging at that point, and the whole thing went way over my head. I will probably watch this movie 20 more times. I guarantee it. Next week, we are doing another one that was requested that I had already done, but it was when we were audio only. So it is time to bring it back and do it here on YouTube and share it with all of my new people and the people who have been with me from the beginning. It's a banger. We are starting 2026 off right. First we did The Hunger, and next week we are doing Near Dark. So make sure you join me next week as we talk about Near Dark. Happy New Year's to everybody. Happy 2026. I cannot wait to see what this year brings. Everybody, please keep up the subscribing, the liking, the sharing, the being involved in the premieres. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Let me know if you think I should start a Discord so we can all chat outside of the premieres. In the meantime, I hope you guys are staying warm. I hope you're enjoying these long nights. They'll be gone before you know it. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
And big finish.